COVID-19 had obviously a huge impact on the economy, but also on government spending, with billions in dollars being spent on both personal and corporate support for Canadians and for Canadian businesses. Many have been asking the question, how is the government going to pay for all this? What potential tax changes do we see in the months and even year ahead? In terms of the capital gains inclusion rate, what you see here is 100 years of capital gain inclusion rates in Canada. Before 1972, of course, we didn't have a capital gains tax at all. That started with a 50% inclusion rate. We've seen it as high as 75% in 1990, and then, of course, it's been back down to 50% for the past 20 years. People have asked, could that rate go back up? The answer, I think, is potentially. After all, at the end of the day, who pays capital gains tax? It's mostly the upper income Canadians, the top 10%. So I think it's certainly a possibility. It would also get rid of this planning they don't like with corporations, surplus stripping, by moving the capital gains tax rate higher, more equivalent to a dividend rate. The second thing people are asking about is, could there potentially be a tax on the principal residence? Of course, in Canada, we don't pay any tax on the principal residence. The entire gain is tax-free. You take a country like the US, where in fact there is a principal residence tax on gains above $250,000 US or $500,000 per couple. So again, if this happened, I think it would be prospectively. It wouldn't be unfair, I think, to tax everyone's wealth accumulated inside of their principal residence retroactively, but perhaps they'll do some kind of proration like they do right now with the years of principal residence exemption, where effectively what happens is, if they introduce this at some point in the future, the number of years, let's say before 2020, would be captured and sheltered, but the years after that, there'd be a prorated gain. In terms of tax rates, people ask me, well, how high can you go? Well, you can see by this chart that we have basically 8 out of 10 provinces in Canada having a personal top rate of over 50%. That rate is pretty high. If you look at who pays the taxes, in fact, what we've got here is a distribution for you. If you look really focusing on the top 9% of all taxpayers, these are people with incomes of over $100,000. They earn 35% of all the income in Canada and yet paid 55% of all the tax. If you take a look at just the top 1%, those are individuals making over $250,000 a year. Their tax rate basically accounts for 23% of all personal income taxes paid in Canada. Canada ranks basically 7th in the world right now in terms of the top statutory personal income tax rates. So I'm not really sure there's much more to go in terms of competitiveness, and therefore I don't really see a lot of increases there on personal tax. And finally, the subject of wealth tax. The Parliamentary Budget Office did an estimate that if they tax people over $20 million on a wealth tax, even at a 1% wealth tax, about 14,000 families would pay, and that would net about $5 billion of revenue. That being said, a lot of debate in the public domain about the pros and cons of a wealth tax and whether it's fair, whether it results to double taxation, whether it ultimately could lead to people using all kinds of tricks to avoid the wealth tax. And in fact, if you go through the years, go back even 20 years ago, where you had about 12 countries having some type of wealth tax. You fast forward ahead to 1991, and between 1991 and 2000, that dropped down to only 9 countries. And then finally, right now, today in 2020, we only have 4 countries that have any kind of wealth tax. Could Canada be the 5th country? Again, I don't really think that's in the cards. And then finally, what about an inheritance or an estate tax? Well, again, here are a list of select countries around the world. You see US there with a 40% top estate tax. Canada doesn't have any type of estate tax. However, what we do have that's different than the US is a capital gains tax on death at a fair market value realization. So again, it's certainly possible, but I'm not really sure that our government would go there.